Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. I'm the Magi, and it's that time again. It's midweek, and I want you to play some Magic because you can win 2 rare or better ICRs in doing so. This week's Midweek Magic is going to take us all the way back to Midnight Hunt in a Phantom Sealed event. So, of course, we are going to be talking about the fundamental differences between Sealed and the format I think most people are more familiar with, a draft. And then we're going to talk about the particulars of this sealed environment versus many others. But before we get into all that, allow me to do the awkward thing and promote the channel. A while back, one of my viewers was kind enough to point out that we are the only channel putting out timely midweek Magic content. So be sure to subscribe right here at the Planeswalker Stronghold for all of your future midweek Magic needs, because we will be bringing you a deck list or strategy every single week. So what do you say we put all this aside and just get to that? Alright, so let's start this week's Midweek Magic off with a somewhat brief primer on Sealed in general, because there are some differences between Sealed and what I think probably most of you are more familiar with, Draft. So whether you stand by Bread's bomb and removal based philosophy, or perhaps you've moved on to Keto's more efficient, evasive creature base, it's fair to say that Limited tends to be about playing your very best cards. And more often than not, that means your bombs and your premium removal. I know most of the times when I'm building a sealed pool, the first thing I do is look at my rares and mythics to see what bombs I have and what's worth building around, and then see how that lines up with the removal pieces that I got in the pool. Secondly, you need to make sure you have a reasonable curve to the cards that you're playing. You need enough things in your 1, 2, and 3 drop slots that means you won't get run over in the early game, because if you don't do anything until turn 3, you're probably going to die on turn 4. On the other side of that coin, of course, you want to make sure you have enough things at your top end, your 4, 5, and 6, and beyond slots in some cases, that you have late threats that allow you to go over the top if the board state has stalled. The lack of card selection in a sealed pool typically means you want to avoid those more aggro-aggressive decks. It's very hard to open a random pool and get enough synergy there to make that work. Of course, if you do happen to open a very good aggressive pool, something like a red-white aggro, there's no reason to not play it. It's just not very likely. And of course, Magic is always going to be a game of turns, which is defined by drawing cards. So our old friend card advantage is always going to be relevant. More often than not, playing a card that grants you some form of card advantage is going to be a very good thing. In Sealed, it is statistically advantageous to take the draw. Yep, you heard me right. I know this goes kind of against the conventional wisdom of Magic that being on the play is good. But when it comes to Sealed, the concepts of the limited pool, card advantage, and the less likelihood of playing an aggro deck means taking the draw leads to more wins. Of course, again, if you happen to open and run that rare aggro pool, this might go the other way. And in Sealed, much like many other limited environments, it's a good idea to save your removal for when your opponent drops those bombs. Sure, you can use your 2-drop removal to take out their 1 or 2 drop, but you're really going to hate that decision when they drop that late game 6/6 evasive creature. And of course, it really makes sense to know as much about the limited environment as you possibly can. But of course, early in the season like this, that can be problematic. What I do highly recommend is take a few minutes and know the combat tricks that are going to be relevant for that particular limited environment, because there's nothing worse than getting blown out in the red zone. And now that we've covered the basics, let's move on to the specifics of this limited format. One of the key pieces of knowledge about any limited environment that is going to impact your win rate the most is the presence of combat tricks. And the best way to go into any limited environment and find those combat tricks is to run a search for the commons and uncommons that are instant speed and contain the phrase "until end of turn." As you can see for Midnight Hunt, white and red get quite a few, black and green get a couple each, and as usual, blue is a little bit lacking in combat tricks of this sort. Of course, being able to play a creature at instant speed is nearly as good as having an instant of its own, as far as potentially wrecking combat, and that is where blue really shines. Red and black don't tend to get any here, green occasionally, and as you can see, white does get more than its fair share, in my opinion, particularly when these have other abilities and flying. That tends to be white's flashy trick. And lastly, don't confuse combat tricks with removal. Things that have destroy effects or exile effects are important, but don't necessarily have to come into play during the combat step, so aren't necessarily combat tricks in their own right. Of course, having said all that, if you're still not very familiar or very comfortable with this sealed environment, one of the most universally easy strategy suggestions that I can make is to rip your 6 packs open and then run it through an artificial intelligence analyzer like the one available to you for free through MtG Assistant. That is going to analyze all the cards that you have available and suggest the theoretically best deck. Of course, the more you know about an individual format, the more you can feel comfortable varying from that sort of strategy. What's that? You didn't catch all that? Well, Matt would like you to know that any deck list applicable to this video can be found down in the doobly-doo. Hey, let's not forget, the whole reason to participate in these totally free Midweek Magic events is the prize support is awesome. And don't forget, if this video gets just 10 likes by 8 p.m. tonight on the day of release, I will be live playing this on my Twitch channel. And with all that having been said, don't forget, smash that like button like Ronnie J would. And until next time, I'll see you in the arena.